And you guys will be timing yourselves, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Alright, let me just make sure my meeting's set quickly. Awesome. If everyone's ready.
Real quick, do you know how much prep we have overall? Is it 5 minutes?
5 minutes total.
Okay. Alright, I'm good to go.
Okay. I've got 5 minutes on the clock for the first affirmative constructive, and we'll go ahead and war. The founding fathers knew how costly it is. The writers of the Constitution were very intentional when they entrusted the power to declare war not to the president, but to Congress. Congress was trusted to make the decision about entering war which best represented public will and the interests of the nation. However, in recent history, political division and sloppy legislation has led to a documented phenomenon of Congress shirking its responsibilities and intentionally yielding its powers to the executive branch. Our system needs a structural correction, and so I stand resolved. The United States federal government should amend the War Powers Act to limit presidential power to initiate armed conflict. To quickly summarize, the War Powers Act of 1973 was passed by Congress in an attempt to further limit presidential power to initiate war. While the Constitution outlines Congress as the authorizer of military action, recent presidential excursions in the Korean and Vietnam Wars saw the executive branch sidelining congressional power. In response, the War Powers Act was passed, requiring the president to notify Congress within 48 hours of deploying armed forces, and forbidding them from remaining for over 60 days unless Congress gave authorization. The intentions were sound, but legislators did not foresee how the changing political landscape of the 21st century would show the law to be insufficient. Let's examine this in the background point. Political fear has incentivized Congress to yield responsibilities. Bi- and nonpartisan policy research institutes, like the Cato Institute, have documented how this happened. Firstly, Congress members realized that holding the decision to declare war was politically risky for their own careers. For example, initiating a failed military endeavor faces voter backlash, while blocking a military operation and then seeing a potential terrorist attack or foreign crisis occur leads to blame against Congress for weakening national security. Thus, lawmakers found it easier to let the executive branch make the gambles of military action. Congress has effectively given up the dirty work by handing out authorizations for use of military force, or AUMFs, not full declarations of war, but legislation which grants the executive branch control over the decision to use armed forces in specified areas. However, these AUMFs are often defined so vaguely and without hard limits, thus being severely abused. For example, the text of the 2001 AUMF, initially intended to respond to the 9/11 terrorists, has been twisted across 4 different presidential administrations to justify military action across 22 different countries, far exceeding original scope by over 2 decades. This leads us to the problem point, the problem that Congress is in a reactionary, dysfunctional state. AUMFs passed by Congress typically lack expiration dates. The 1957 Middle East AUMF, issued during the Cold War, still remains active today because Congress hasn't issued a bill to clean it up. Now, it's incredibly hard for Congress to reel in the executive branch working through AUMF overreach. To cancel an AUMF, Congress not only needs to pass a bill through both of the intensely divided Senate and House committees, but Congress must also muster a 2/3 supermajority to override presidential vetoes. Historically, presidents have always threatened to or actually have vetoed bills that try to restrict presidential wartime power. For example, the Iran war powers resolutions, and attempt to stop Iraq engagements, quote-unquote, justified by the 2002 Iran AUMF, passed both committees but was vetoed and failed to gain a supermajority due to party division. Congress has left its post at the gate that keeps unchecked executive power from running loose, and now must resort to ineffectively trying to catch up with presidential excursions. To fix this, we can examine the solution point. Fix legislation to flip default incentives. Experts have suggested amending the War Powers Act such that existing and future authorizations issued by Congress contain sunset dates, automatic expiration dates for when armed forces are required to be withdrawn unless authorization is renewed or official war is declared, this being enforced through Congress's power of the purse, the cutting of military funding for the campaign after the sunset date except for the safe withdrawal of armed forces. By setting built-in expirations directly in issued AUMFs, we shift from the current reactionary model, with Congress trying to chase down the executive branch, to the original model intended by the Founding Fathers, with the executive branch requiring the green light to sustain armed conflict. The benefits are twofold. Firstly, benefit 1, reeling back extraneous power. Effectively enforcing automatic sunset dates will prevent so-called mission creep, ensuring Congress-issued limits to check the executive branch cannot be stalled by political party divisions. Furthermore, we'll see benefit 2, encouraging effective decision-making. Sunset clauses ensure Congress won't be able to hide behind the smokescreen of ambiguous AUMFs. Swiping away the smokescreen of indefinite AUMFs creates a more efficient, predictable, and effective system for the protection of our national security. And now, I'm now open for cross-examination.
Okay, thank you for that speech. I'm going to set the timer. Is it 3 minutes for cross-examination? Or is it 2? I think it's 3,
It's
right?
2.
It's 2? Okay. Cool. 2 minutes on the clock. All right. My first and foremost question would be, where in the War Powers Act does it mention AUMFs?
So the AUMFs have been it is a more modern term that we're using for congressional authorizations specifically for such things. It's not explicitly mentioned as an official term. That's just what we're calling it in modern.
Sure, but where in the War Powers Act does it mention or reference AUMFs? Or anything like military authorizations? Can you name a section that does that?
Sure, where it states that Congress forbids troops from remaining for over 60 days unless Congress gives authorization. That's specifically what an AUMF is. It is that authorization that Congress gives.
Okay, so you're saying that authorization... Okay, so that authorization is the AUMF you're referring to.
Yes, AUMFs does.
And your amendment is targeting that authorization?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Okay. So they have automatic sunset dates. Who would be responsible for passing these new AUMFs? Would it still be Congress or?
This would still be Congress, okay. Yes. However, we'd be amending the War Powers Act to ensure that these authorizations include sunset dates. Because right now they don't.
So you said Congress is shirking its responsibilities?
Yes, it's currently because of the situation where Congress is faced with the decision making where they actually rather not want to make that decision and rather give that to the executive branch.
Right. Can you name the last time an AUMF was passed?
Last time an AUMF was passed, off the top of my head, I can only think of the 2002 one.
Okay.
But, obviously, they haven't needed to pass anymore. That's exactly the point.
And can you just could you just name the most recent AUMF that hasn't been repealed?
2001.
Okay. Got it. That will be all. Thank you. See the rest of my time. Okay. Alrighty. That's going to be 5 minutes on the clock. Good? All right. Take one sip of water and I'll get started. I negate resolve the United States federal government should amend the War Powers Act to limit presidential power to initiate armed conflict. The resolution clarifies the affirmative amendment through one word, initiate. Merriam-Webster defines it as to cause or facilitate the beginning of. The affirmative amendment then is about restricting the president's ability to start a conflict. To win this round, the affirmative has to prove that the War Powers Act is causing the problem and that amending the act actually fixes the problem. If they fall short on either, the ballot should be for the negative. We can start with contention 1, initiation amendments fail. Recent history shows that loopholes make it very hard for War Powers Acts to control when a precedent starts a conflict. The Congressional Research Service found that of the 135 presidential reports under the War Powers Act, only one cited the section for introducing forces into hostilities, leaving Congress to argue over the other 134. Because the Act's language is vague, presidents can claim compliance without ever triggering the provisions that give Congress its strongest authority. Lawmakers debate those definitions instead of military action itself. Meanwhile, the action continues by default. The last 3 years, Congress has tried 19 times to stop military action after presidents move into Syria, Iran, Niger, and Venezuela. Every attempt has failed. Stricter initiation limits seem like the obvious fix, but they overload Congress. Matthew Waxman of the Council on Foreign Relations notes that if every small strike, drone operation, defensive interception, or cyber response counts as initiating armed conflict, Congress would have to review hundreds or thousands of actions a year. That buries lawmakers in minor cases and pulls their attention from the major operations that actually demand oversight. Worse, a president could flood Congress with small actions to keep it busy while big operations slip through. Stricter limits don't fix the problem, they risk deepening it. Contention 2, Congress fails to interpret the law. The Affirmative Amendment still relies on Congress twice. First to pass the bill, then to check whether the president is violating the new laws. The second is the problem. War is dynamic. Every new action demands a fresh judgment about whether the president is overreaching. Yet most members of Congress have no incentive to enforce the War Power Act for 2 reasons. Waxman identifies the first: war's outcome is uncertain. Vote against the precedent and the war goes well, a congressman looks weak on security. Vote for it and it goes badly, they look reckless. Either way, their seat is at risk. So most simply don't vote. They keep debating vague language and delaying until the conflict is over. The second is polarization. Political scientist Gordon Friedrichs explains that restricting the president takes bipartisan coalitions, but polarization has turned every vote into a party loyalty test, and members won't cross their side. Without compromise, Congress stalls. Amending the act doesn't fix political incentives or polarization. It still leans on Congress to act and trust the president not to exploit loopholes. But even if the affirmative creates the perfect amendment and permanently fixes Congress's incentives, its act will still be struck down the moment it passes. This is contention 3. Limiting presidential power requires changing the Constitution. American law has 2 levels. At the bottom, ordinary statutes, the U.S. Code. Above them, the Constitution. Every statute must obey the Constitution, and the War Powers Act is no exception. The Act knows this. Section 8D says it plainly. Nothing in the WPR changes the constitutional power of Congress or the President, and nothing in it gives the President any power he didn't already have. So when the affirmative amends the WPR to limit presidential power, they aren't editing a statute, they're trying to change Article 2 of the Constitution. In Zavotsi versus Kerry, the Supreme Court held that Congress can't use ordinary legislation to rewrite the Constitution's separation of powers. The President already has independent authority to repel threats, protect troops, and command forces under Article 2 of the Constitution. Only a constitutional amendment can take that away, not a rewrite of U.S. Code. The AF is reaching for a power they don't have. Remember the burdens. The affirmative has to show that its amendment actually solves the problem, but it still leans on Congress, is unconstitutional, and risks worsening the problem in practice. For that reason, I proudly negate. All right, I'm ready for cross.
Awesome. I've got 2 minutes on the clock for cross-examination, and I'll go ahead and start that now. That was a great speech. Naturally, just got a couple of questions. Firstly, would you say, yes or no, the decision to make war should be made by a single person?
Should the decision to start war be made by a single person? I don't think that the decision to start war should be made by a single person.
Great. Why not?
I mean, I'm not personally arguing that it's bad, but you can make that case if you want. You can list the reasons you want, but sure. I'm not making that argument.
Okay, sure, we can move on. Have 4 different presidential administrations used the 2001 AUMF for different purposes? Would you say yes or no?
Different purposes is vague, so I don't exactly know what you're referring to.
For purposes not initially intended for.
Again, I can't really say intended for is vague. The Act says 9/11 and related groups, for terrorist attacks and related groups, sure. And we can argue back and forth about whether or not those actions have met that definition or not.
Got it. I want to ask about that point about you're saying stricter limits don't fix the problem but risk deepening the problem. Could you agree that if the president is currently not under the jurisdiction of the War Powers Act because definitions are vague, wouldn't we need stricter definitions?
Sure, but the problem is that stricter definitions only mean that Congress has to look over more reports. And as you said, in your case, Congress is slow. And the more reports they look through, the more problematic that becomes, because the larger actions that the president is taking would get overlooked. Right now, there's still a level of balance. Congress has some checks. You strengthen the definitions, Congress has a lot more actions to look through. That creates the problem.
Got it. And just one last question. When you're saying that AF is trying to give more power to Congress, would you agree that Congress currently does have power, solely has the power to officially declare war?
To officially declare war, yes.
Awesome. Amount of time.
Okay.
I will begin 5 minutes of prep time starting now. Pausing prep time at 2 minutes and 55 seconds. Write that down. This will be a 4-minute rebuttal speech, and if everyone's ready, I'll go ahead and start. As Calvin Coolidge once said, the only hope of a short war is to prepare for a long one. This applies directly to today's debate, because a direct result of Congress shirking its responsibilities by hiding behind AUMFs is that the full wartime executive powers and the official wartime defense budgets are not activated, leading to unsure, unclear, and historically ineffective military campaigns. My opponent has today brought up 3 arguments against reforming AUMFs to include sunset debates. And in this speech, I want to go down and just respond to each of them, showing how ultimately a reform of the War Powers Act is still a necessary function to restore power balance in our system. The opponent's first argument was that stricter limits doesn't fix the problem, and that there's because of vague definitions within the War Powers Act, such conflicts or such military actions like drones or cyber attacks doesn't fall under the jurisdiction of the War Power Act. However, my response is that this doesn't apply to the affirmative case today. That the debate about definitions of the War Powers Act is a completely different debate from what we're talking about today. Specifically, the affirmative team is discussing reforming AUMFs. This is a widely recognized issue that the presidential administrations across the past 2 decades have been abusing many AUMFs for presidential executive overreach in military conflicts that AUMFs currently weren't specified for. The argument for the negative side on this point is null in today's round. His second point brings up how Congress or any change to the current system requires congressional power. And I'd like to point that this is exactly the problem the affirmative team is bringing up. The negative team brings up how congressmen are scared of making the decision about war because their seats are at risk, and furthermore, how political polarization makes it so that when Congress tries to reel back in the executive branch, they're not able to due to party coalition divides. Now, I want to clarify, this is exactly the point I was making in my first speech, how Congress, even if they wanted to try and check the executive branch, aren't able to due to these political divides. That's why we want to include automatic sunset dates in AUMF. Currently, in order to check the executive branch and to cancel an AUMF or restrict presidential power to initiate conflict, Congress has to go through the whole process of getting a bill through both the committees, overriding the president's veto, and all of that. By setting explicit end dates automatically in these AUMFs, we get to avoid all of that process and allow Congress to actually exert its congressional authority without being blocked by political divisions. In response to his contention 3, his final contention, that limiting powers requires a change of the Constitution, I would contend that the affirmative team amends the War Powers Act. We are not amending the Constitution. Congress already has powers under the current system to limit presidential power. That Congress is the one that has the authority to declare war and to issue authorizations. What we're doing is making sure Congress can actually enforce it by giving them by ensuring that AUMFs come with automatic sunset dates, or ensuring that the powers of the person by Congress can effectively be used in the current system to actually limit presidential power. Right now, as noted again, because of all of these structural political divisions and all of these changes that have left Congress not being able to get through and actually exert their power, that's why we need a change in the War Power Act to make sure that they're actually able to do this. It's for all these reasons I continue to stand on the affirmative side.
Okay, I'm gonna start running my prep time, and then 5 minutes of running prep. Okay. I'm gonna start my next speech. That was 2:43. Sound good to everyone? Okay. 4 minutes on the clock. Right? Okay. The affirmative case fails because it confuses the War Powers Act and the AUMF. The problem is that the AUMF is an entirely separate law, and amending the War Powers Act doesn't fix it. In Calvin Coolidge debate, we have to stick to topicality. We have to debate the topic, and AF fails to do that. They're talking about another law. Amending, each AUMF is its own individual law, meaning time limits, automatic sunsets, all of those changes have to be written in the law themselves. You can't write the War Powers Act to change future legislation in some way. That's just not how the legislative branch works. Moreover, Congress hasn't set a new AUMF in 24 years. My opponent agrees to this. The most recent one still active is the 2001 AUMF. This matters because under the affirmatives world, Congress still has to pass new AUMFs to give the president power. But my opponent agrees that politicization and polarization have made Congress reluctant to take any action. This includes passing new AUMFs, meaning that the president won't be able to rely on those AUMFs. They'll resort to the same vague definitions that they're relying on now. My opponent says that their amendment doesn't solve for this. That's exactly my point. They don't solve for the vague definitions that are allowing the president to take these actions in the first place. Their amendment fails. AUMFs are not the problem, vague definitions are. They talk about congressional funding and power of the purse, but our research shows that this is largely deteriorated due to their point. Congress is unwilling to act. They're polarized, they're politicized. They can't decide on anything, and this includes on whether or not to cut funding. But to make it worse, an automatic sunset on the AUMF only worsens the problem of war. Me and my opponent can both agree that death is bad. So if we limit the time the president has to conduct military conflict, they'll just become more aggressive. A year-long mission will be rushed in 2 months with heavier artillery, more missiles, and riskier deployments. That risks the lives of both American troops and the civilians in foreign nations. The chances of this all increase. That worsens the impact and increases the chances of escalation. Now, finally, we can move on to the point about constitutionality. My opponent's response is we're amending the War Powers Act and not the Constitution. That's our point. You can't amend the War Powers Act to limit presidential power. The War Powers Act doesn't increase presidential power in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't legally do that. So to amend it to limit presidential power, the power that you're limiting is the power found in Article 2 of the Constitution. In other words, a constitutional amendment is required to solve the problem. Amending the U.S. Code by amending the War Powers Act does nothing. The affirmatives case, again, we can go back to the same 3 burdens I introduced in my first speech. They don't show that the War Powers Act is the problem. They blame it on the AUMF. Their amendment solves for the AUMF, which doesn't fix the vague language in the War Powers Act, and it doesn't even fix the status quo. It only makes the president more emboldened to take action. It forces them into a shorter deadline and makes them operate under stricter, tighter conditions. That only increases aggression. The terminal impact in this round is war. We want to prevent it, but making the president act faster and take more risks doesn't do that. It just increases escalation. So for those reasons, I urge you to vote negative. Thank you.
All right, the affirmative team will be resuming their 2 minutes and 55 seconds of prep time, starting now. expired. And this will be a 4-minute speech from Ready. And I'll go ahead and start. Okay. The American system needs to shift from the current reactionary congressional model back to the enforcing authority model originally intended by the Founding Fathers. In this last affirmative speech, I'll respond to all of the negative points brought up in the last speech and reiterate the need for an affirmative plan. My opponent's first point was that of topicality, that we can't rewrite every individual AUMF. And he also mentions that Congress hasn't set a new AUMF in 24 years. And I agree, that's the point. Current AUMFs are sticking way too long. That's why we need to be more specific. We need sunset dates. We need to set expirations so that AUMFs do not overstay their welcome. Now, the opponent says that AUMFs are not the problem, and that the definitions are the problem. I would like to clarify, there are two different problems where presidential powers are being unchecked. One, where presidents using drones, cyber attacks, etc. I agree, those are currently, maybe they don't fall under the definitions of the War Powers Act. And I agree, the Affirmative Teams Plan is not solving that. But there is another problem, that where presidents currently are abusing AUMFs to justify military engagement, such as through the 2001 AUMF, which has been used by 4 different presidential administrations. This is a significant problem, and we are solving this. This is still a significant reform that does fall underneath the Coolidge resolution, and thus is valid in today's round. Now, my opponent brings up the point about how Congress is unwilling to act, and that includes whether or not to cut funding. That's exactly the point. Again, that's why we want to include funding cuts via sunset methods to happen automatically. We don't want to have to wait for a bill to get passed through 2 committees and then have to get through a presidential veto in order to limit presidential power. And now my opponent says that it's going to worsen the problem of war by limiting the time of the president to conduct conflict. Will be creating a greater conflict because it'll be more rushed and have more risks. The counter to this is that we're actually making sure Congress makes the decision. Because we're going to be facing AUMFs that will be expiring, Congress can no longer shirk away from the decision of whether or not we should be going to war. The political incentives behind Congress making the decision are very enormous. Congress will be forced to make a decision that best benefits the American public because, as we both agree, Congress is afraid of political pressure. AUMFs were not meant to be a solution or were not meant to guarantee long-term conflicts. They're meant to be an independent interim system to transition between either a full declaration of war or a return of troops and a withdrawal by the executive branch. This is what we're ensuring that the sunsets in these AUMFs will lead to. And to the point about constitutionality, that my opponent says amending the war powers, we can't be limiting presidential power. What we're doing is we're not taking power away from the president, we're giving enforcement back to the Congress to enforce existing powers. And now while we're not explicitly taking powers away, we're not taking powers away from those which are delegated by the Constitution. We're giving more power to Congress to enforce their limitations on the presidential branch, to their existing limitations over the executive branch. Now that we've seen that the affirmative team upholds all 3 burdens, let's go back and reiterate over the affirmative team's place. By ensuring that AUMFs come with automatic sunset dates, we ensure that there will be no more runoffs. AUMFs won't be able to use out of scope if Congress gets stuck and Congress will no longer be getting stuck trying to repeal an AUMF by political division or partisan party splits. And furthermore, the hard limit from the AUMF will serve as a force towards decision, political incentive for Congress to no longer hide behind ambiguous terms, but to either make more efficient decisions regarding the declaration of war or enforcing congressional authority. For too long has the legislative branch been shirking its duties. It's time to restore the power balance envisioned by the writers of the Constitution. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure speaking.
Okay. I have 2 minutes and 43 seconds on my prep time left. I'm going to use the rest of that. This is going to be my last speech, 4-minute negative rationale. Everyone can confirm? Okay. Fantastic. This round is driven by two simple burdens. The affirmative has to prove the amendment they're proposing is both practically feasible and that it improves upon the status quo. There are 3 reasons why the affirmative's amendment fails. Current AUMFs can't be changed by amending the War Powers Act. My opponent never responds to this. You can't amend a singular law to force Congress to write all other AUMFs a certain way. My opponent switches their position between their rationale and constructive speeches because they realize this, and they switch their position to just amending the 2001 AUMF. But this runs into the same problem. You can't amend the War Powers Act to amend an AUMF. You have to amend the AUMF itself, and that's not what we're talking about today. Second, my opponent never responds to the point about vague language. They just said their amendment doesn't cover it. Presidential deployments and military actions have been driven by the vague definition of hostilities in the War Powers Act. AUMF or not, these bad definitions still allow the president to abuse power under Article 2 of the Constitution. But the affirmative's amendment doesn't solve for this. They might reform the AUMF, but the president will still continue to do the action. The president has made deployments in countries not by using the AUMF as justification, but by using vague language in the War Powers Act as justification. So the problem still remains. Third, my opponent doesn't really respond to the point about increased aggression. All they say is that this kind of activity isn't covered by the affirmative amendment, and they make a vague statement about how giving Congress power back will fix the problem. But if sunsets and funding cuts are automatic, the president is still guaranteed a window to act. The window is now much smaller, increasing aggression and increases the chances of escalation. They never respond to this link. They never respond to this impact either. Everyone loses. The military strategy degrades because a long operation is forced to be done in a short period of time. More troops die, more foreign civilians die, the damage is worse, more conflicts fail, and the chances of actually going into war significantly and drastically increase. This is the world that the affirmative is creating, one that incentivizes the president to act recklessly. The core concept driving this round is congressional gridlock. The fact that Congress is unwilling to act for political reasons and is too polarized to pass bills. Yet my opponent's amendment still relies on this same failing Congress to act. Automatic funding cuts or not, automatic sunsets or not, Congress still has to pass new AUMFs, and my opponent has just told you that they're not willing to do that. So the result is that Congress won't pass any new AUMFs. The amendments they're proposing will never go through, and the status quo will either remain the same or become worse. The affirmative utterly fails at the burdens that were set at the beginning of this round, and for that reason, you should vote for the negative. All right, good debate.
Great. Well done.
I didn't write blocks yet, so that was, yeah.
You didn't write what?
I don't have blocks written for this topic yet, so it's like...
What are blocks?
Like argument blocks, like general responses.
Like bits of rhetoric for, okay.
Yeah, so I was like writing in the middle of, yeah.
All of my stuff is for like dashes and bullet points.
Need to write that in later today. But yeah.
So I need a minute to keep writing out my feedback for you guys. How about you guys, I'm gonna jump off the call and finish my writing for maybe like 5 or 10 minutes, and you guys can just chat about the round, and then I'll hop on and just I'll share the document with you and give you a summary of it.
Sure. We we have 15 minutes left this call. If this meeting does expire, I'll just send another email with the new link.
Okay, cool. I'll be back in a minute. Or a few minutes.
Yeah, that was fun. Did not expect the AUMF thing. That's what I'm running that on neg, and I didn't expect to see AUMFs on F. That was cool.
Oh, really? On neg? Huh. How do you do that? You just saying the president already has enough power or something?
Like the power is in the AUMF and not the WPR. So fixing that WPR doesn't, Same argument, just other way around. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I when I presented it, it was a little convoluted. My idea was that it's not that we're reforming existing AUMFs, but the War Powers Act uh, will require, or authorizations will be, like the new authorizations that are put out will have to have sunsets in them. And I'm not sure, like, even you could add a clause in the war. I don't even know if that's actually possible.
Yeah, like I don't know. I think like legislatively it's weird because it's like how
strange.
Yeah, it's like weird because each AUMF is like isn't like they refer to different sections. Like I don't think the 2001 2002 are considered like the same type of law because they like refer to different sections of the WPR, and it's a whole mess. At least you ran a plan. I don't know if you watched the like the seminar, the webinar they put out or whatever it's called, but like yo they they really don't want to see plans, which sucks.
No,
because it's like you literally name amend like the vaguest word in the book.
It's hard to. I was thinking of trying to run it without a plan, and I'm like, how do you even? What do you even know what to talk about at this point?
Yeah, like what? Oh, I want to amend it to limit power, and you just like talk in abstract. Limiting power is good.
Yeah, I guess I get what they're trying to get at with you only discussing the abstract philosophical ideas, but in reality, this is a really low or to the ground resolution. It's all based on historical examples and the nitty-gritty details of legislation. So.
That, and also just like you can't expect us to do like an abstract philosophical debate in front of like lay judges that don't know what like util is.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
How many years of debate have you been doing?
Second year.
Oh, wow. Okay. Nice. Really good for second year.
Oh, thank you. This was not like, every speech I was a minute under. That physically hurts. That hurts.
I had like 30 seconds on it. No, that was not bad.
I don't know. I usually am the type to go like a couple seconds over. Yeah. I don't know. I don't love this res particularly. I think it's like there's no like there's too few links, too few like ways to go.
Yeah, I guess I feel like they came up with it pretty hastily just because they just look at the headlines, what's going on. Okay, this sounds cool.
No, they literally just stole the res from the April PF topic.
Oh.
I was looking over it, like I was like, I wonder if there's any topic similar to this one. Like the most recent NSDA topic is like it's like literally the same thing, just worded like slightly differently. It's United States should eliminate presidential authority to deploy military forces abroad without congressional approval.
Okay, I mean,
like they just stole it, bro. Like, come on. I don't know. Yeah. Were you a cop last year?
No, this is my first year doing Coolidge.
Oh, okay. Nice.
Yeah. It's definitely different from TP.
Oh, yeah. How is TP? Yes. Wait, what were you gonna say?
Oh, yeah. So you've done Cup previously? I think I saw you were there last year.
Yeah. I didn't do Coolidge as like a main league. I just one of my teammates was like, "Yo, I know season is over, but I found this crazy tournament. You want to go?" And I'm like, "Okay." And then she's like, "So you're gonna do all the work?" And then
This was you qualified through the 2v2?
Yeah, the North Carolina Open.
President's Cup, right?
No. There's the North Carolina Open's also a 2v2. Last year.
Okay.
This year, the North Carolina Open did not go too well for me. I qualified in Texas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the Texas Open.
I don't know because I was at Texas as well. I don't remember seeing you though. So.
I don't know. I don't know what Texas was. It was a weird tournament. Yeah.
In the beginning, so originally it had to be rescheduled, right? Because of the snowstorms here or something.
Yeah.
And so when they rescheduled me, they moved me to the middle school division. Well, for first round, I had to go around trying to find Mrs. Burden and get everything sorted. So it was like I was delayed by like half an hour. So they matched me up with the guy who would have gone to buy that round. And then it turns out that he just didn't show up. And so I just
got away
first round.
Nice. That's
I qualified through roll down actually from the winter or from the spring online. I got really lucky. I was the top 3-1 record, and then they had a couple extra spots. So
Oh,
snuck in.
last year we qualified because we were 5th and they were taking top 4, and we emailed him the day after, like, "Yo, extra spots, please," and we got in. Yeah. How was online? Like, a bunch of people from my team did online, but I low-key bummed out. So, was it good?
I prefer online, honestly.
Really?
For me, yeah. For some reason, I feel like I tend to do better on just maybe something about how I look in person. I'm really like tall but skinny, and my posture is not great because I'm on the computer all the time. So maybe that just gives off like a bad vibe to the judge.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, this whole like lay judge thing is a little finicky. I don't know about, like, yeah.
Especially for the cup. I guess maybe like for regional tournaments, because they just don't have the people, they need volunteers. But for the cup, you could at least maybe bring in some more experts, maybe, instead of completely volunteer.
Outrounds are thankfully mostly like not. Yeah, outrounds are like almost always more experienced judges, so that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your partner was Bio Combo Pian?
Yeah.
Okay.
God.
Cool. I remember looking through the tracker, and I tend to try and find as much information about people as I can.
Hey, me too. Look. There's a guy from North Carolina, and I know him specifically because he has a 8-page doc on every single like debater who does Coolidge in North Carolina, with like stats, style, difficulty level.
What?
So, like, listen, man, like, I think everyone in debate is like a little bit of a stalker. Like, you gotta pull up the LinkedIn page of your judge to figure out what industry they're in, bro.
Yep. Just it comes naturally with the game.
Yeah. If you don't have good debating skills, or if you don't have good stalking skills, you're not a good debater. just goes hand in hand.
Comes from looking up judge background, and then also just research in general.
Yeah. Yeah, but my partner is a generational bum. But I actually have no clue what she's running for this cup. She said something about the FBI. So, I'm not gonna lie, bro. I don't know what she's doing, but we'll see. Yeah. She really wanted to run something about Russia, but we'll see.
Russia? How was...
Wanted to being the key word here. Like, last year, we figured out how to run a case about China for the tariff resolution.
Oh.
We should put tariffs on Mexico. We should put tariffs on Mexico. On Af and Nay. For both. Same case.
What?
Same case, one link flipped. Yeah.
Well, interesting.
Sadly, no more trolling at COP with China.
War powers. Amend the War Powers Act so president can never invade China.
No, amend the War Powers Act so that Mao Zedong gets all power over American military. That's good because we want to create a world empire.
Yeah, just abolish the Constitution.
Of course, yeah. Counterplan, counterplan, abolish the Constitution. It's outdated.
Have people actually run counterplans in Coolidge? Like, you can't, like, they don't take plans.
Well, you know they have Rule 6, right? You know Rule 6 of the Coolidge handbook is debate the merits of your opponent's arguments, not the type of arguments they're running. I guess you could interpret that as being like a blank check to run whatever you want.
The debate will be about the Coolidge handbook.
Yo, I've had several debates about the Coolidge handbook. That's why I know Rule 6. Rule 6 is the only one anyone ever talks about.
I haven't looked up into that. I should probably find that.
Also, Rule 4. Evidence. I think evidence is Rule 4. They moved it around, so I don't know, but like...
Oh, has Coolidge released the brief?
Nope.
Like the paper. They said that the early June.
It's not early June yet. Early June is June 28th.
Oh, okay.
Last year it was released 4 days before Cup. It was released on June 28th, which is why I said that. This is fun.
Dang.
So.
Oh well.
Oh, all the Thales Academy kids get access to the brief early. So. Yes.
Thales is why is that? Is it like their person who writes it on their?
So like, you know Bob Luddy. Hi.
Hey, do you guys want to take a couple more minutes to discuss this, or do we need to go?
Sure, I've got plenty of time.
Yeah, I got time.
Yeah, we only have 4 minutes left in this call, so if we want,
So we need to start another call.
Yeah.
How about you send us another call, and I'll send you the link to the document in that call, or I'll just send it an email. Yeah.
Okay.
See you in a minute.
How was the round? Oh fuck! I totally forgot.